Hey everyone, today we are going to walk through the complete procure to pay process in SAP Material Management. This is a vital process in any organization that involves everything from requesting materials to making the final payments to the suppliers. I will explain it step by step using a simple scenario. So let's get started. The procure to pay process in SAP MM is the end-to-end process for purchasing goods or services, starting from identifying a need and ending with the payment to the vendors. Now, let's take a quick look at the procure to pay, or we can also call it as a P2P cycle. Now, this slide gives us a high-level overview of the entire process, which involves several key steps starting from identifying the need for materials or services all the way to making the final payment to the suppliers. Now, if you could see here on the screen, these are the main steps involved. Requirements determination, source of supply determination, vendor selection, purchase order creation, purchase order monitoring, goods receipt, invoice verification, and then finally payments to the vendor. In the upcoming slides, we will dive deeper into each of these steps to understand how they work and how they connect to ensure a smooth procurement process. So let's get started. Requirement determination. The first step is identifying what materials or services your company needs. So this is so often done through a purchasing requisition. What is meant by purchase requisition? So when you are placing a request to purchase for a materials or a services, the request you put on a document is nothing but a purchase requisition. Okay, now let us take an example. Now, there's a production department at the ABC Manufacturing, and they have realized that they need 500 kgs of steel and 1,000 bolts for their production cycle. Now, what they have done, they have creating a purchase requisition in the system to request these materials. Okay. Next, source determination. So we need to figure it out where we are going to get these materials. This is called the source of supply determination. The procurement team will look at the potential suppliers to see who can provide the materials at the best price and the terms. The next is the RFQ, or we can also call as the request for quotation. So once we have our purchase requisition, we convert that purchase requisition into a RFQ and send it to our few suppliers. Now continuing to our example, from the ABC Manufacturing, we send out these RFQs to the three different suppliers. Let us take XYZ Metals as a one supplier, Steelco as the second supplier, and the Global Steels as a third supplier. So we are basically saying to the vendors, hey, we need 500 kgs of steel. What is your price and how soon you can deliver it to us? Okay. So this is the process will be done in the second stage. Now, vendor selection. Here, in this phase, the goal in this step is to identify the best possible sources that meet our requirement. Which means in this phase, the best supplier is selected based on the criteria such as price, delivery time, and the terms by sending them the RFQs, which is request for quotations. However, in the process of vendor selection, okay, we have other things that are involved. Now let us see what exactly it is. Now, once we send those RFQs, the supplier will respond with their quotes. Quotes are nothing but the quotations. Okay. Now these quotes are recorded in the SAP. And this is where we do a bit of comparisons. We look at the prices, the delivery times, and the other terms and conditions that might, whichever it is required. For an example, we have received the quotes from back from all the three suppliers. Okay. Now what we will do, we will enter these into our system and compare them side by side. Now what will happen, this help us to figure it out which supplier offers the best deal. Okay. Now this process, entire process, what we are saying it as a receiving and maintaining the quotes. Okay. Now let's move on to the next thing. Now after comparing the quotes, we will select the supplier that offers the best terms. But what about the suppliers we did not choose? We need to make sure their quotations do not get processed by mistake. So what we will do, we mark those quotes as rejected in the SAP. So continuing to our example, at ABC Manufacturing, we decided to go with the Steel Co. Okay, because they have offered the best price and the delivery time. Now what we are going to do, we mark these quotes for the XYZ materials and the global steel as rejected, and we send them the rejection letters to inform them that their bid wasn't been successful. So this process we are mentioning it as rejecting unsuccessful quotations. Okay. Now finally we have the vendor selection. So based on our example, we have selected Steelco as our vendor. The next we have purchase order creation. Now we have chosen our supplier. The next step is to create a procurement element, which could be a purchase order, a contract, or a scheduling agreement. This is the formal order that we send to the supplier saying, yes, we are going ahead with this purchase. Now, in our example, we convert steel cost quotation into a purchasing order for a 500 kgs of steel. Now, what is happening here? This is an official document that Steelco will fulfill. All right. Sometimes before we finalize the order, it needs to go through an approval process. This is known as a release strategy in SAP. It's basically the way to ensure that everything is checked and approved by the right people before we proceed. For an example, our purchase order for steel might need be approved by the purchasing manager at the ABC Manufacturing. Once they give the green light, then the purchase order is officially released and send it to the steel. Okay, so this is all happening in the purchase order creation. Let's move on to the second stage, purchase order monitoring. Now, what is happening here? After the purchase order is created, we don't just sit back and wait. Okay, instead, we actively monitor the purchase order to ensure everything is on track. This is what we call it as a purchase order monitoring. It involves tracking the order's progress and staying in touch with the vendors to resolve any potential issues before they escalate. So this step is all about ensuring that our order is fulfilled on time and to our satisfaction, right? Let's move on to the second stage, goods receipt. So now the next big step is receiving the goods. Once the steel co delivers the steel to our warehouse, we need to record a goods receipt in the SAP. This confirms that the materials has been arrived and updates in our inventory. Okay, so coming back to the example, so when 500 kgs of steel arrives at ABC Manufacturing, our warehouse team checks it and make sure everything is in a good condition or not. And then they will record the goods receipt in the SAP system. Clear? All right. Next is invoice verification. Now that we have received the goods, the supplier will send us an invoice. This brings us to the invoice verification. Okay. In this step, we will check the supplier's invoice against the purchase order and the goods receipt. Okay. Now this is known as a three-way matching. We want to make sure that everything aligns before we approve the invoice for payment. Okay. This step is all about the accuracy and ensuring that we only pay for what we have received. So, continuing to our example, Steel Co send us an invoice for the steel. Our accounts payable team compares it with the purchase order and the goods receipt. Everything checks out, so we go ahead and make the payment to Steel Co. to ensure completing to the further process. Okay. Now, moving on to the next stage, payment for vendor. Finally, after everything is being checked out, we proceed to payment to the vendor. Now, this is the last step in the P2P cycle, where we process the payment based on the agreed payment terms, whether it's an immediate payment or within the 30 days. SAP handles this automatically once the invoice is verified. This with this step, we closes the loop on the P2P cycle, ensuring that our suppliers are paid for their goods or services. Right? And there you have it. That's the complete of SAP MM Procure to Pay process, from creating a purchase requisition to making the payment to the vendor. It's a straightforward process, but each step is crucial to ensure everything runs smoothly. I hope this explanation was clear and easy to follow. I will proceed to the next activity.